Eli's world begins with a day that feels like any other, in the small town that knows him by name. But it's on this day that an unexpected turn of events will change everything. A glimpse into Eli's world. The sun stretched lazily over the horizon, casting soft, golden rays across the quiet streets of Pinneville, a town so small that everyone seemed to know everyone else's business. Eli Waters, a bright-eyed 11-year-old, yawned as he stretched out of bed, the familiar smell of his mother's homemade pancakes wafting up from the kitchen. For Eli, mornings were a comfort, a blend of routine and quiet anticipation. Today was no different. Eli's life was simple, but filled with the kind of joys that only a small-town child could understand. He wasn't worried about anything more serious than which of his friends he'd see first on the bus that day, or if his teacher, Miss Harper, would let them spend extra time outside during recess. In his mind, today was just another ordinary school day. He threw on his school uniform, a slightly worn navy blue polo shirt with the Pinneville Elementary School logo stitched on the pocket, and ran downstairs. His mom, Marie Waters, stood in the kitchen, flipping pancakes while humming along to the radio. "Morning, Eli," she greeted, ruffling his hair as he slipped into his chair. "Morning, Mom," Eli replied, already eyeing the plate of pancakes stacked high in front of him. "Big day today, huh? Got that spelling bee coming up," she reminded him, sliding a glass of milk across the table. Eli shrugged. "Yeah, but it's no big deal. I'll probably just wing it." He grinned, his youthful confidence shining through. Marie chuckled, placing her hands on her hips. "You always do, but you're gonna ace it, like always." There was pride in her voice, as there always was when she talked about Eli. Eli's father, James Waters, stepped into the kitchen, already dressed for his job as a mechanic at the local auto shop. "Hey, champ," he said, offering a high five before grabbing his own breakfast. "You're gonna knock that bee out of the park, right?" Eli high-fived his dad, already eager to finish eating and head out. "Yeah, totally." The bus ride. The walk to the bus stop was one of Eli's favorite parts of the day. It wasn't far, just a block down from their cozy two-bedroom house, past the local grocery store and the small park where he and his friends would meet up after school for soccer games. He kicked at pebbles on the sidewalk, imagining himself scoring the winning goal. The streets were already alive with the usual morning hustle. Mrs. Johnson, the retired librarian, was out front watering her roses, and Mr. Higgins, the elderly war veteran, sat on his porch sipping coffee, giving Eli a friendly wave. It was the same every day, a small-town rhythm that never changed. At the bus stop, Eli was greeted by the familiar faces of his friends, Timmy and Sarah. They were already deep in conversation about the latest video game Timmy had discovered. "You have to play it, Eli," Timmy urged. "It's got dragons, knights, and this crazy boss fight at the end." Eli nodded along, half listening as his eyes wandered to the road, waiting for the big yellow school bus to turn the corner. That bus, driven by Mr. Thompson, had been a staple of their school days for years. Mr. Thompson was quiet, always keeping to himself, but dependable. Eli never thought much of him beyond the usual good morning nod he gave as he boarded. Soon enough, the familiar roar of the bus echoed down the street. Eli felt a rush of excitement. Riding the bus wasn't just a mundane part of the day for him. It was the start of new adventures, inside and outside of his head. The bus represented freedom and camaraderie, a place where kids like him could be themselves away from the eyes of adults. As the bus pulled up, Eli and his friends hopped on, making their way to their usual seats toward the back. The bus was its own little world, with its hierarchy of who sat where, who got to control the conversation, and which games or gossip would take center stage for the ride. "Morning, Mr. Thompson," Eli said automatically, sliding into his seat by the window. The bus driver gave a barely perceptible nod, his eyes focused on the road. Life in Pinneville. As the bus rumbled through the town, Eli looked out the window, taking in the familiar sights. The general store, the diner where his family went on Sundays, and the old church that had been around for as long as anyone could remember. Pennville wasn't much to look at by city standards, but to Eli, it was home. Every crack in the sidewalk, every corner of the park held memories. Eli's thoughts drifted as he watched the trees blur past. He liked to imagine himself as the hero of the stories he read at night before bed. An explorer charting unknown territory, a knight facing down an evil sorcerer, or a pilot flying into danger. Today, his imaginary adventure involved uncovering a secret treasure hidden somewhere in the town. In his mind, Pennville was more than just a sleepy little town. It was the backdrop to all the heroic adventures he hadn't lived yet. His daydreams were interrupted by the sound of his friends laughing. Timmy had managed to catch a fly with his lunchbox, showing it off like a trophy. "Bet you can't do that, Eli," he taunted playfully. Eli rolled his eyes but grinned. "Yeah, because I'm busy saving the world over here." Sarah shook her head. "Boys and their bugs. Let me know when you actually find treasure, Eli." Eli laughed along, his thoughts returning to the world outside the window. The bus made its usual stops, picking up more kids from different corners of town. Each stop was a mark on the map of his day, a signal that everything was as it should be. Or so he thought. The foreshadowing. As the bus drove further, the mood inside began to settle. Kids were getting quieter, focused on what awaited them at school. But Eli couldn't shake a strange feeling creeping in. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but something felt off. It wasn't the usual route that the bus took, but the roads looked the same. Maybe it was just his imagination. "Hey," Eli nudged Timmy. "Does this look right to you?" Timmy glanced out the window. "Looks the same to me." "Why?" Eli shrugged, trying to brush off the feeling. "I don't know. Just feels weird today." Timmy wasn't one for overthinking things. "You're probably just nervous about the spelling bee." Maybe that was it, Eli thought. He was just jittery. He had done well in spelling bees before, but this one had a reputation for being tough. Principal Larson had even mentioned it in the morning announcements, saying the winner would represent Pennville in the regional competition. Eli had laughed it off then. But now that the time was drawing closer, he felt a slight twinge of nervousness. He didn't like to lose, even when he pretended it didn't matter. The calm before the storm. The bus turned onto Baker Street, a usual stop for some of the kids, but as it rolled past Eli's designated drop-off point, he felt his heart skip a beat. They didn't stop. His stomach dropped. It wasn't panic, not yet, but a quiet alarm began to ring in his mind. "Mr. Thompson missed my stop," Eli whispered to himself, suddenly feeling small in his seat. He turned to look at his friends, but they were too engrossed in their conversation to notice. He could feel a tightness in his chest, a strange sensation that told him something was about to go very, very wrong. Eli's world, once so predictable and safe, was about to take a turn he could never have seen coming. And so, the day that began as ordinary, sunlit, peaceful, and full of promise, was now shifting, like the opening of a story that Eli had only read about in books. But this wasn't fiction. This was real. What began as a typical day now takes a dark and unexpected turn. Eli's world of safety and routine crumbles as the bus veers off course, and he's left stranded in unfamiliar territory. A quiet shift in atmosphere. The bus hummed steadily down the road, and for a few minutes, Eli tried to convince himself that everything was fine. He stared out the window, forcing himself to ignore the strange feeling tugging at him. It had to be a mistake, just a simple detour. Maybe there was construction, or maybe another kid lived in a new neighborhood that he didn't know about. Pennville wasn't big, but sometimes new houses sprang up in the far corners of town, almost like secret hideouts. But deep down, Eli knew something wasn't right. The chatter on the bus had died down. The older kids were scrolling through their phones, and the younger ones were either gazing out the window or lost in their own thoughts. Mr. Thompson, the bus driver, remained silent as always, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. Eli looked around at his friends, trying to read their faces. Timmy was doodling on the back of his notebook, oblivious to the subtle change in route. Sarah, who usually picked up on these things, was resting her head against the window, eyes half closed. No one else seemed to notice what was going on, but Eli couldn't shake the growing knot in his stomach. He shifted in his seat, finally breaking the silence. "Hey, Timmy, don't you think this is weird? We passed my stop." Timmy barely glanced up. "Huh. Nah, it's probably nothing. Maybe Mr. Thompson has to drop someone off first." Eli nodded, but he wasn't convinced. He kept looking at Mr. Thompson, searching for any signs that the man had realized his mistake. But the bus driver showed no reaction, no flicker of acknowledgement in the rearview mirror. He just kept driving, his hands gripping the wheel tightly, eyes locked forward as if he were on autopilot. The moment of realization. As the bus veered onto Creekside Drive, Eli's unease shifted into full-blown anxiety. Creekside was nowhere near his neighborhood. It was on the outskirts of town, a place he had only passed once or twice when his dad drove them to the next town over. The houses here were spaced far apart, with large, untended yards and overgrown trees that loomed over the road like silent sentinels. Eli's heart pounded in his chest. This wasn't just a detour. This was wrong. "Mr. Thompson." Eli called from his seat, his voice shaky but loud enough to be heard. "You missed my stop." For a moment, there was no response. The other kids glanced up, some of them raising their eyebrows in confusion. Eli felt the eyes of his classmates on him, but he didn't care. He needed to get home. "Mr. Thompson." Eli tried again, louder this time. Finally, the bus driver shifted slightly in his seat, his eyes flickering to the rearview mirror for just a second before settling back on the road. "Sit down, Eli," he said in a low voice, barely loud enough to be heard over the rumble of the bus. His tone was cold, almost mechanical. Eli froze. He had never heard Mr. Thompson sound like that before. The man was usually so quiet, so neutral. But now his voice had an edge to it, like a blade cutting through the air. It sent a chill down Eli's spine. The bus rolled on, turning onto a narrow, tree-lined street that Eli didn't recognize at all. Panic set in. The wrong stop. Without warning, the bus screeched to a halt. The suddenness of it jolted everyone from their seats. The younger kids yelped in surprise, and even the older kids exchanged confused looks. Eli's heart raced as he looked around. Where were they? Through the window, Eli saw nothing familiar. The street was deserted, the houses old and shabby, with peeling paint and broken fences. The trees cast long, dark shadows across the cracked pavement, giving the whole scene a surreal, eerie quality. It was the kind of place where you'd expect something bad to happen. Mr. Thompson turned in his seat, his expression hard and unreadable. "This is your stop, Eli," he said, his voice flat. Eli blinked, his mind struggling to process what he'd just heard. "What? No, this isn't my stop." Mr. Thompson didn't respond. He simply stared at Eli, his eyes cold and unblinking. The silence in the bus was suffocating. Eli could feel the tension in the air, the other kids waiting, watching, unsure of what was happening, but sensing that something was very wrong. Eli stood up slowly, his legs trembling. "This isn't where I live," he said again, his voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Thompson didn't move. "Get off the bus, Eli." The command was sharp, final. Eli's heart pounded in his chest. He looked around at the other kids, hoping someone would say something, do something. But they were all frozen in their seats, eyes wide with confusion and fear. No one knew what to do. For a split second, Eli considered refusing, staying on the bus and demanding that Mr. Thompson take him home. But there was something in the driver's eyes, something dark and dangerous, that made Eli realize that staying on the bus might not be any safer than getting off. With shaking hands, Eli grabbed his backpack and slowly made his way to the front of the bus. Every step felt heavy, like he was walking toward some terrible fate. He could feel the eyes of his classmates on him, but no one spoke. No one dared. When he reached the front, Eli hesitated, glancing one last time at Mr. Thompson. The man's face was like stone, unyielding, emotionless. Without a word, Eli stepped off the bus and onto the cracked pavement. Stranded. The bus doors closed with a loud hiss behind him, and before Eli could turn around, the bus pulled away, leaving him standing alone on the side of the road. He watched as it disappeared around the corner, taking with it any sense of normalcy he had left. For a moment, Eli just stood there, his mind blank with shock. This couldn't be happening. This kind of thing didn't happen in Pinneville. Mr. Thompson had been their bus driver for years. He wasn't supposed to just drop kids off in the middle of nowhere. But as Eli looked around at the desolate street, the reality of the situation began to sink in. He was alone, completely and utterly alone. Eli turned in a slow circle, trying to get his bearings. The street was eerily quiet, the only sounds the faint rustling of leaves in the breeze and the distant hum of the bus engine as it disappeared. The houses lining the street were old and rundown, most of them looking like no one had lived in them for years. The windows were dark, the yards overgrown with weeds. It was the kind of place his parents had always warned him about, the kind of place where you didn't want to be alone, especially as a kid. Eli's heart raced as he fumbled for his phone, but when he pulled it out, his stomach dropped. No signal. He tried dialing his mom's number anyway, but the call wouldn't go through. Panic clawed at his chest. He was stranded, with no way to contact anyone. He stuffed the phone back into his pocket, trying to calm the rising fear in his chest. He needed to think. There had to be a way out of this. Searching for help, Eli took a deep breath and started walking, hoping to find someone. Anyone who could help him. As he made his way down the cracked sidewalk, he glanced at the houses, wondering if he should knock on a door. But every house he passed looked abandoned, with broken windows and overgrown yards that gave them an unsettling, haunted feeling. The longer he walked, the more hopeless it seemed. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as Eli wandered through the unfamiliar neighborhood. His legs ached, and his heart raced with each step. The sun, which had once bathed the town in warmth, now seemed distant, the shadows lengthening as the afternoon crept on. Every sound, a distant creak, the rustling of leaves, made him jump, his imagination conjuring up worst-case scenarios. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Eli spotted a woman in her yard, tending to some wilted flowers. She was older, her back bent with age, but she was the first sign of life he'd seen since stepping off the bus. Relief flooded his chest as he hurried over to her, waving his hand to get her attention. "Excuse me," he called out, trying to keep his voice steady. "Ma'am, can you help me? I'm lost." The woman looked up, squinting at him through her thick glasses. "What are you doing out here, boy?" she asked, her voice gruff but not unkind. "You don't belong in this part of town." Eli nodded, swallowing hard. "I know. My bus driver. He dropped me off at the wrong stop. Can you help me call my parents?" The woman studied him for a moment, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Come on inside," she said finally, nodding toward the small, run-down house behind her. "We'll get you sorted out." As Eli steps into a stranger's home seeking help, the situation takes a turn for the worse. What seemed like a glimmer of hope turns into a chilling, disorienting experience that leaves Eli questioning who to trust. A step into the unknown. Eli hesitated for a moment outside the old woman's house. The air felt thick, and an uneasy silence clung to the street, as if the whole neighborhood were holding its breath. His instincts screamed at him to run, but his rational mind told him this was his only chance for help. After all, what other option did he have? His phone had no signal, and the streets were as lifeless as if they belonged to a forgotten ghost town. There was no sign of another person around. "I don't bite, kid," the woman said, her voice raspy, breaking the stillness. She motioned again with her hand, urging him toward the door. "You'll catch a cold if you stand out here much longer." Eli swallowed his doubt and stepped forward. He was desperate to get home, and this woman seemed like his only option. The house looked worn from the outside, paint peeling off the wooden siding, the front steps creaking under his weight. It smelled faintly of must and dust, like it hadn't seen a good cleaning in years. Eli's feet felt heavy as he crossed the threshold, the door creaking shut behind him with a sound that made his heart race. Inside, the house was dimly lit, and the air was thick with the scent of old wood and something else, something sour that Eli couldn't quite place. The furniture was outdated, mismatched, and covered in a thin layer of dust. Faded, yellowing lace curtains barely allowed light to filter through the small windows, casting everything in a dull grayish hue. It was a far cry from the warm, cozy house Eli had grown up in, where everything was in its place and smelled of fresh laundry and his mother's cooking. The old woman shuffled past him, her movements slow but steady. Her voice cut through the silence again. "You can sit over there," she said, nodding toward a worn-out armchair near the corner of the living room. "I'll make some tea and see about getting you a phone to call your folks." Eli nodded mutely, not wanting to be rude, but as he sat down in the chair, something gnawed at him. The upholstery was rough against his skin, and as he leaned back, he noticed strange stains on the fabric. He quickly pulled his hands away, unsure of what he had touched. His heart raced as he scanned the room, looking for something, anything, that would give him reassurance. But all he found were more unsettling details. On a small table nearby sat an old photograph in a cracked frame, showing a young woman standing next to a man in a military uniform. Their smiles, frozen in time, were unsettling somehow, as if they didn't belong in this strange house. The minutes dragged on. Eli's leg bounced nervously as he waited for the woman to return. His mind raced with questions. Why had the bus driver dropped him off here? Was this neighborhood really that close to his town, or had they crossed some invisible line into a place he'd never known existed? And why wasn't anyone else around? The woman finally emerged from the kitchen, carrying 2 chipped mugs filled with steaming tea. She set one down on the small table next to him and settled into the chair opposite. Her wrinkled hands trembled slightly as she lifted her cup to her lips. "Go on," she urged. "Drink up. It'll help calm your nerves." Eli glanced at the tea, hesitant. His mother had always warned him about taking food or drinks from strangers, but he didn't want to offend the woman. Reluctantly, he picked up the cup, feeling its warmth in his hands, but he didn't drink. Instead, he focused on the room, trying to spot a phone. But all he could see were shelves cluttered with old knickknacks, dusty books, and more faded photographs. The odd conversation. "So, where are your folks, anyway?" the woman asked, breaking the silence again. Her voice was calm, but there was something off about her tone, something too casual, too prying. She peered at Eli over her cup, her eyes dark and beady behind thick glasses. Eli set his tea down, untouched. "They're at home. I was just trying to get back there, but my bus driver, he dropped me off at the wrong stop." The woman smiled, but the expression didn't quite reach her eyes. "That's unfortunate," she said, her voice carrying a strange, almost mocking lilt. "But it happens, doesn't it? You know how unreliable people can be." Eli shifted uncomfortably in his seat, suddenly feeling very exposed. Something about her response didn't sit right. He cleared his throat. "Do you have a phone I can use to call them? I need to let them know where I am." The woman tilted her head slightly, considering him with an intensity that made him squirm. "Phone, eh?" she muttered, her voice barely audible. "Well, we'll see about that." She stood up and shuffled toward a door on the far side of the room, disappearing into what Eli assumed was a back room. Eli watched her go, his unease growing with every second she was out of sight. His eyes darted around the room again, looking for any clues about this woman. The longer he sat in her house, the more he noticed things that didn't make sense, things that made his skin crawl. The wallpaper, once probably floral, was now faded and peeling, revealing patches of mold underneath. A strange, low humming sound seemed to come from somewhere deep in the house, barely noticeable but persistent enough to set his nerves on edge. And then there were the photographs. The same faces appeared in multiple frames scattered around the room, always the woman and the man in uniform, but the man never looked quite the same in any two pictures. Sometimes he was older, sometimes younger, but always with that same unsettling smile. The warning signs. Eli's pulse quickened. Something wasn't right. He stood up, his legs shaky, and started toward the door. He needed to get out of here. He didn't know why exactly, but every instinct told him to leave. He reached for the doorknob. But just as his fingers brushed the cold metal, the old woman's voice rang out from behind him. "Leaving already?" Eli whipped around, startled. The woman was standing in the doorway of the back room, her face partially obscured by shadow. She didn't move, just stood there watching him, her expression unreadable. I need to go," Eli stammered, trying to keep his voice steady. "I think I can find my way home." The woman didn't respond right away. She took a slow, deliberate step forward, and in that moment, Eli realized something. Her movements, though slow and deliberate, were far too measured for someone of her age. There was a strange grace in the way she walked, as if she were younger than she appeared. "Why the rush, boy?" she asked, her tone sickly sweet now, like she was playing a game. "You're safer here than out there." Eli felt his breath catch in his throat. Something about the way she said that sent a chill through him. He backed up a step, his hand still on the doorknob. "No, I really need to go." The woman's eyes narrowed. "Suit yourself," she said softly, "but you won't get far." Eli didn't wait for her to say anything else. He yanked the door open and bolted outside, his feet pounding the pavement as he ran as fast as he could down the street. He didn't look back. He couldn't. His mind was racing, his heart thundering in his chest. All he knew was that he needed to get as far away from that house as possible. The labyrinth of streets. But as Eli ran, something strange happened. The street didn't look the same as it had when he first arrived. It seemed longer, the houses stretching out in either direction endlessly, like some twisted version of the place he had first walked through. The trees loomed taller, their branches casting dark shadows across the pavement, and the streetlights, flickering dimly in the distance, offered little comfort. He turned the corner, hoping to find a familiar landmark, but instead, he found more of the same. House after house, all identical in their decay and disrepair. It was as if the entire neighborhood had shifted, morphing into a labyrinth of empty streets designed to keep him lost. Panic surged through Eli. He had no idea where he was. His lungs burned as he kept running. But every time he thought he had found an exit, he ended up right back where he started. The same broken-down houses, the same cracked sidewalks, the same eerie silence that clung to everything like a heavy fog. His thoughts raced. Was this some kind of nightmare? Was he imagining things? He pulled out his phone again, desperately trying to get a signal, but the screen was blank. No bars, no service. It was as if he had been cut off from the outside world entirely. The encounter. Just as Eli was about to give up hope, he spotted something in the distance. A figure, tall and shadowy, was standing at the end of the street, barely visible in the fading light. Eli's heart leaped as Eli tries to make sense of his unsettling experience. His desperate attempts to escape the maze-like neighborhood lead him deeper into confusion and fear. With no one to turn to, he faces terrifying discoveries about where he is and why. The looming figure. Eli's breath caught in his throat as he stumbled toward the figure at the end of the street. His pulse pounded in his ears, every instinct screaming for him to run, but the flicker of hope, maybe this was someone who could help, pushed him forward. The figure stood tall and motionless, their silhouette barely distinguishable in the fading light. The sun was dipping below the horizon, casting long shadows across the street, deepening the eeriness of the deserted neighborhood. "Hey," Eli called, his voice hoarse from the adrenaline pumping through him. "Hey, can you help me?" The figure didn't move. It remained rooted in place, like a statue or a shadow, a silent sentinel at the edge of Eli's vision. The closer he got, the stranger it seemed. Eli slowed down, his legs trembling, his mind racing with questions. Why weren't they moving? Couldn't they hear him? As he approached, a chill ran down Eli's spine. Something about the figure wasn't right. It was tall, unnaturally tall, taller than any person should be. Its form was shrouded in shadows, and the closer Eli got, the more his gut screamed at him to stop. His feet felt like they were moving on their own, driven by a combination of dread and desperate curiosity. When Eli was just a few feet away, the figure finally moved, slowly, deliberately, turning its head ever so slightly to face him. Eli froze, his heart hammering in his chest. The figure's face was shrouded in darkness, but the faint glint of eyes staring back at him sent ice down his spine. "Help me," Eli whispered, his voice barely audible. The figure didn't respond. Instead, it took a step forward. And that was when Eli saw it. The face wasn't human. The eyes were sunken, hollow, glowing faintly in the dim light. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, and its mouth. The mouth was twisted into a wide, unnatural grin that stretched too far across its face, revealing rows of jagged teeth. Eli's blood turned to ice. He stumbled back, his legs weak with fear, and before he could react, the figure lunged toward him. It moved with impossible speed, its long, bony arms outstretched, reaching for him. Eli let out a strangled cry and turned, running as fast as his legs would carry him. Lost in the maze, he sprinted down the street, his heart thudding painfully in his chest. Every instinct screamed at him to run faster, but no matter how fast he went, the shadows seemed to close in around him. The houses, the trees, the cracked pavement, all of it blurred together in his panicked vision as he ran blindly, turning corners without thinking, desperate to escape the nightmare chasing him. Eli didn't dare look back. He could feel the figure gaining on him, its cold, unnatural presence lingering just behind him. His breaths came in ragged gasps, his muscles burning with exertion. His legs felt like lead, but he couldn't stop. If he stopped, he knew it would catch him. He darted around a corner, hoping to lose the figure in the twists and turns of the unfamiliar neighborhood. But as he rounded the corner, his hope faded. The street ahead of him was just as empty, just as endless, as the ones he had already passed. No matter how far he ran, it felt like he was trapped in a looping nightmare, the same scenery repeating over and over again, as if the neighborhood itself was alive, conspiring to keep him lost. His legs wobbled beneath him, exhaustion threatening to overtake him. Eli's thoughts spiraled. Was this some kind of trap? Was the whole neighborhood cursed? Nothing about this place made sense anymore, and the more he thought about it, the more his panic grew. The bus driver, the old woman, and now this thing, none of it fit into the world he knew. The air around him felt thick, suffocating, as if the neighborhood itself was closing in on him. Every breath was a struggle, every step a monumental effort. But he couldn't stop, not now. He couldn't let it catch him. A glimmer of hope. Just as Eli felt his legs about to give out, he spotted something in the distance, faint but unmistakable. A flicker of light, warm and welcoming, like a beacon in the darkness. His heart leaped. It looked like a gas station, the kind with a small convenience store and neon signs glowing in the windows. The sight of it filled him with a surge of hope. It had to be real. He wasn't imagining it. He wasn't trapped in some nightmare after all. Ignoring the burning in his lungs, Eli pushed himself harder, sprinting toward the gas station with every ounce of strength he had left. As he got closer, he could see it more clearly. A small, run-down building with flickering lights in the windows and an old gas pump out front. It looked like it had been there for decades, untouched by time. He burst through the door, gasping for breath, his heart still racing. The inside of the store was dimly lit, the shelves lined with dusty products that looked like they hadn't been touched in years. Behind the counter, a man sat slumped in a chair, his face hidden behind a newspaper. "Please, help me," Eli panted, rushing up to the counter. "There's something chasing me. I don't know where I am. I need to call my parents." The man slowly lowered the newspaper, revealing a tired, weathered face. He stared at Eli for a moment, as if trying to process what he was hearing. Then, without a word, he reached under the counter and pulled out a small battered phone. Eli grabbed it eagerly, his hands shaking as he dialed his mom's number. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. No answer. He dialed again, his hands trembling. Still no answer. "Please, I just need to get home," Eli begged, looking at the man behind the counter. "Can you drive me? Can you call the police?" The man didn't respond. He just stared at Eli with a strange, vacant expression, his eyes glazed over. It was as if he hadn't heard a word Eli had said. "Hello," Eli said, his voice rising with panic. "Please, say something." But the man remained silent. Slowly, he lifted the newspaper back up, covering his face once again, as if Eli weren't even there. Eli's chest tightened with fear. Something was terribly wrong. He glanced around the store, hoping to find something, anything, that could help him. But the more he looked, the stranger everything seemed. The products on the shelves were old, outdated, covered in dust. The magazines near the counter were yellowed with age, their covers showing dates from years ago. It was as if the store had been frozen in time, forgotten by the rest of the world. The terrifying discovery. Just as Eli was about to leave the store, a sound caught his attention, a faint, rhythmic tapping coming from somewhere nearby. He turned toward the back of the store, where the door to a storage room stood slightly ajar. The tapping continued, steady and unrelenting, like the ticking of a clock. Eli hesitated. Every instinct told him to leave, to run as far from this place as possible, but something about the sound drew him in. Slowly, cautiously, he approached the door, his heart pounding in his chest. He pushed it open, revealing a small, dimly lit room filled with boxes and old equipment. And there, in the center of the room, was a small television set, its screen flickering with static. The tapping sound was coming from the TV, though there was no one around to operate it. Eli stared at the screen, his mind struggling to make sense of what he was seeing. Then the static cleared for a moment, revealing an image that sent a wave of terror through him. It was him. Eli, standing on the street, looking lost and terrified. The camera angle was high, like it was taken from a hidden vantage point. The screen flickered again, and the image changed. Now it showed the old woman's house, with Eli standing outside, knocking on the door. His heart nearly stopped. Someone had been watching him. This whole time, someone had been following him, recording his every move. But who? And why? The television flickered again, and the image shifted to something even more horrifying. The figure. The tall, grinning figure that had chased him earlier. It was standing at the edge of the screen, its glowing eyes locked onto the camera, as if it knew it was being watched. Eli stumbled back, his mind reeling. He had to get out of here. Now. The chase resumes. Just as Eli turned to leave the room, the door slammed shut behind him with a deafening bang. The lights flickered, casting eerie shadows across the walls. Eli's heart raced as he fumbled for the doorknob, but it wouldn't budge. He was trapped. Panic surged through him as the tapping sound grew louder, more insistent. The TV screen flickered again, showing the figure getting closer, its twisted grin growing wider. Eli pounded on the door, screaming for help. As Eli fights to escape the dark forces closing in around him, he discovers the truth about the neighborhood and the unsettling past that binds him to it. In a desperate bid for freedom, He confronts his fears and uncovers the terrifying reality behind his plight. The door slams shut. Eli's fists battered the door, his breath coming in ragged gasps as panic coursed through him. The tapping sound echoed in the small storage room, growing louder, almost mocking him. He could hear the faint static of the television behind him, its flickering light casting ghostly shadows across the walls. "Let me out, please," Eli shouted, his voice rising in desperation. He threw himself against the door again, but it wouldn't budge. The realization hit him hard. He was trapped, locked away in this forgotten corner of the world, and the figure that had chased him was now free to close in. His heart raced as he spun around to face the flickering TV. It had become a twisted reflection of his fear, showing his every move, his every panic-stricken thought. He stepped closer, compelled by a mix of terror and curiosity. The figure was no longer just a distant shadow. It was there, in his mind, haunting him with every flicker and flash of static. Suddenly, the screen went dark, and for a moment, there was nothing but silence. Eli held his breath, his heart pounding loudly in his ears. And then, the static returned, but this time it was accompanied by a whisper, a soft, insidious voice that seeped through the noise, sending chills down his spine. "Eli, Eli." It called his name, drawing him in like a moth to a flame. He shook his head, trying to dispel the fear clawing at his mind, but the voice grew louder, more insistent. "Help us, Eli. Help us escape." The fractured memory. Eli's breath quickened as the images on the screen shifted again. It showed the neighborhood, but it was different now. Vibrant, alive, filled with people. Children played in the streets, families laughed on porches, and the sun bathed everything in a warm glow. It felt like a distant memory, a glimpse into a life that felt achingly familiar. The voice continued, soft and pleading. "You can save us, Eli. You are the key." He didn't understand. What did they mean? Why him? He wasn't a hero. He was just a kid trying to find his way home. Eli's eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape. The walls seemed to close in, the shadows thickening like a living entity, suffocating him. "Help us, Eli," the voice urged again, echoing around him. "You have to remember." "Remember what?" Eli shouted, his frustration boiling over. "What do you want from me?" The television flickered once more, revealing a series of images, snapshots of a life that wasn't his, but somehow felt like it was. The old woman appeared again, standing outside a house with a smile on her face. Children played at her feet, laughter ringing out like a sweet melody. But then the images darkened, showing the same house abandoned, windows shattered, and weeds overtaking the garden. Eli felt his heart sink as the realization struck him like a bolt of lightning. This neighborhood, this place he had stumbled into, was once vibrant and alive. But something had changed. Something terrible had happened. The sinister truth. The television changed once more, now showing an old newspaper article. The headline read, "Local family vanishes without a trace." Eli's breath hitched as he recognized the faces in the grainy photograph. The family from the happy memories. The old woman, the children, and the man in the military uniform. They were all there, smiling, but there was a sense of foreboding that seeped through the image. "Eli," the voice whispered again, more urgent this time. "You must find the truth." "What truth?" Eli yelled back at the screen, frustration mounting. "What do you want from me?" "The same thing we all want. Freedom," the voice said, its tone shifting from pleading to somber. "We are trapped here, just like you. This neighborhood was cursed long ago, a place of lost souls. You must help us break the cycle." Eli's heart raced. He felt the weight of their words, the desperate plea behind them. But how could he help? He was just a boy, lost in a maze with no way out. Yet deep down, he felt a flicker of recognition. He had to confront the truth. Determined, he pressed his palms against the cold screen, searching for answers. "What do I need to do?" he demanded, his voice steady despite the fear that gripped him. The break in the shadows. The screen flickered one last time, illuminating the room in ghostly light. "You must find the heart of the neighborhood, the old oak tree. It holds the key to our freedom. The truth lies within the roots, buried deep in the past." Without thinking, Eli stepped back, the urgency of their words pushing him into action. He turned back toward the door, ready to fight his way out. But the room had changed. The shadows seemed to thicken, coiling around him like serpents. "Please," he begged, "let me out." But instead of an answer, the shadows writhed, as if alive. A low growl echoed through the room, vibrating the very air around him. Eli's heart raced as he pounded on the door again, desperation flooding his veins. With one last heave, he threw his weight against it, and it burst open, sending him tumbling into the gas station. He landed hard on the floor, scrambling to his feet, but the man at the counter was gone. The space felt emptier than before, echoing with the weight of silence. Eli didn't look back. He sprinted out of the store, the flickering lights behind him dimming as he ran. He needed to find that oak tree, the heart of the neighborhood. It was his only chance. The search for the oak tree. Eli raced down the street, the eerie silence pressing against him like a weight. He ran past houses that seemed to lean closer, watching him with hollow eyes. The fading daylight made everything feel surreal, casting long shadows that danced along the ground. But Eli pushed through the fear. He was determined to find the tree. He ran for what felt like hours, his legs burning, his lungs gasping for air. But as the shadows deepened, the streets twisted around him, pulling him deeper into the heart of the neighborhood. He felt the weight of the past pressing down, the whispers of those trapped souls echoing in his mind. Finally, just as doubt began to creep in, he spotted it, the oak tree. Towering and ancient, its gnarled branches stretched toward the sky, casting a shadow over the ground. The sight filled him with a mixture of hope and dread. This was it, the heart of the neighborhood. As he approached, the air grew heavy with an electric charge. The ground felt alive beneath his feet, pulsing with energy. Eli reached the base of the tree and knelt, running his hands over the rough bark. There had to be something here, some clue to break the curse that held this place captive. His fingers brushed against something cold and metallic buried in the roots. Heart racing, Eli began to dig, pulling away the dirt and debris until he unearthed a small rusted key. It shimmered in the dim light, the surface engraved with intricate patterns that hinted at its age. Unlocking the past, holding the key tightly in his hand, Eli felt a surge of purpose. This was what he needed, what the voices had called for. He glanced around, suddenly aware of the shadows closing in. The figure was lurking somewhere nearby, drawn to him like a moth to a flame. "Eli," the voice whispered again, low and insistent. "You have to hurry. It's coming." With newfound determination, Eli scrambled to his feet and looked for the nearest house. He had to find out where this key fit. He raced toward the nearest home, its front door hanging slightly ajar. As he entered, the air felt thick with an oppressive weight, as if the house itself was holding its breath. He moved quickly through the dimly lit rooms, searching for something, anything, that would indicate where the key belonged. Shadows danced across the walls, and the whispering voices grew louder, urging him on. In the back of the house, he stumbled upon a small study. Dust-covered books lined the shelves, and an old wooden desk sat against the wall. Eli rushed to the desk, rifling through drawers, his heart pounding in his chest. And there, nestled beneath a pile of papers, he found a small, ornate box. Eli's breath quickened as he examined it, the design mirroring that of the key. "This has to be it," he murmured, trembling as he inserted the key into the lock. The sound of metal against metal echoed in the quiet room, and he turned the key, feeling the tension release as the box clicked open. Inside, a collection of photographs lay scattered among letters, images of the families who had once lived in the neighborhood, smiles captured in time. But then Eli's gaze landed on something else. An old journal, its pages yellowed and worn. He pulled it out and began to read, the words drawing him deeper into the past. The journal's secrets. As Eli uncovers the truth behind the neighborhood's curse, he faces the consequences of its dark history. With newfound courage and understanding, he must confront the forces that seek to bind him, unraveling the past and fighting for the souls trapped in the shadows. The journal's secrets. Eli's hands trembled as he opened the journal, the pages crackling softly beneath his fingertips. The words were scrawled in a hurried hand, the ink smudged and faded, but he could still make out the essence of the story contained within. The entries detailed the lives of the families who once thrived in the neighborhood, tales of laughter, community, and warmth. But as he read on, a darker narrative began to emerge, whispers of betrayal, fear, and a lingering shadow that hung over the area. The last few entries struck a chord deep within him. They spoke of a terrible tragedy that had unfolded, a fateful night when the neighborhood had been swallowed by darkness. A child had gone missing, a boy about Eli's age. In a desperate search, the families had turned on each other, their unity fracturing under the weight of fear and suspicion. The journal detailed how the boy's spirit became trapped, lingering in the shadows of the neighborhood, calling for help. Eli felt a chill run down his spine as he realized that the boy was him, at least a part of him. The narrative unfolded like a tragic play, and he could feel the weight of the emotions pouring from the pages. It wasn't just a story, it was his story. Suddenly, the door creaked open behind him, and Eli's heart raced. He turned to see the tall figure standing in the doorway, its eyes glowing like embers in the dim light. The grin stretched across its face, sent a wave of fear crashing over him, and he quickly shoved the journal back into the box. "Eli," the figure said, its voice a low rumble, echoing in the room like thunder. "You shouldn't have come here. You don't belong in this world." A battle of wills. Eli's heart raced as he stood his ground, fueled by the knowledge he had just uncovered. "I'm not afraid of you," he shouted, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at him. "I know who you are. You're the one who kept everyone trapped here." The figure laughed, a sound like shards of glass falling to the ground. "You think you can understand. This place is mine, and it will remain so until the end of time. You cannot save them, Eli. They are lost, just like you." "No," Eli shouted, the resolve swelling within him. "I can help them. I can help myself." He held the key tightly in his hand, feeling its cool surface against his palm. "You don't control me. You don't control this neighborhood anymore." The figure took a step closer, the shadows swirling around it like a cloak. "You think that key will save you. It's just a relic of the past, a symbol of your despair. It won't change what has happened here." "I know what happened," Eli said, his voice unwavering. "The truth is stronger than your lies. The families here were torn apart by fear and doubt, but I can help them remember who they are." With each word, Eli felt a surge of energy coursing through him, an empowerment born from the truth. He stepped forward, lifting the key toward the figure, defiantly confronting the malevolent force that sought to consume him. A fateful decision. The figure hesitated, its grin faltering for the first time. Eli seized the moment. "I'm going to break this curse," he declared. "I will free you all." As if in response to his words, the shadows around the figure began to writhe and twist, contorting in agitation. "You think you can break what has been forged in darkness," the figure hissed, its voice filled with malice. "You will fail, just like the others before you." Eli's heart raced as he felt the weight of the moment settle over him. He was standing at the crossroads of fate, where past and present collided. With the journal and the key, he held the power to confront the dark legacy of the neighborhood. But he needed to believe in himself. "Maybe I can't do it alone," Eli admitted, his voice softening. "But I'm not alone. I have everyone who once lived here, the families, the children. They're all with me." The figure recoiled, shadows swirling chaotically around it. They are nothing but echoes, forgotten memories. You cannot save what is already lost. With a deep breath, Eli closed his eyes, recalling the voices he had heard earlier, the whispers of the trapped souls, the laughter of children playing, the warmth of community. He felt their presence enveloping him, a tide of energy urging him on. Together, he breathed, the word resonating deep within him. We can reclaim our home. The confrontation. With newfound conviction, Eli raised the key high, its metallic surface glinting in the dim light. I will unlock the truth. I will reveal the memories that bind us, and I will set you all free. The figure's expression twisted in rage, its form shifting and undulating, as if struggling against some unseen force. No, you will not take this from me. It screamed, and the shadows surged forward, threatening to engulf Eli. But he stood firm, his heart pounding with determination. I am not afraid of you. He plunged the key into the air, aiming it toward the figure. I choose light over darkness. As he did, the shadows erupted around him, swirling violently as if responding to his declaration. A blinding light erupted from the key, illuminating the room and banishing the shadows. Eli felt the warmth spread through him, filling the space with hope and clarity. The figure shrieked, its form dissipating as the light pushed back the darkness. No, you cannot do this, it cried, its voice echoing in desperation. Eli felt the surge of energy from the key intensify, and the memories began to flood back. The laughter of children, the warmth of friendship, the bond that had once tied the families together. The room pulsed with life as the voices of the past joined in a harmonious chorus, drowning out the figure's cries. The unraveling curse. As the light enveloped him, Eli felt the weight of the past lift, the pain and betrayal melting away into the warmth of forgiveness. He could see the memories of the families intertwining with his own, weaving a tapestry of love, hope, and unity. In that moment, the figure writhed in agony, the darkness clawing at it like a tempest. You cannot erase me. I am the keeper of this place. It roared, but the strength of Eli's conviction and the memories of the families overpowered it. You're wrong, Eli shouted back, his voice strong and unwavering. You're not the keeper of this place. You're its prisoner. With one final surge of energy, Eli thrust the key forward, directing it toward the heart of the neighborhood. The light exploded in a brilliant flash, engulfing everything in its radiance. The room vanished, replaced by a dazzling expanse of warmth and color. Eli felt a sensation unlike anything he had ever experienced, a wave of peace washing over him. The echoes of laughter and love enveloped him, filling him with a sense of belonging. The shadowy figure, once looming and powerful, disintegrated before his eyes, its cries fading into the light. The reunion. When the light dimmed, Eli found himself standing beneath the old oak tree, surrounded by the families who had once lived there. Their faces were filled with warmth, their smiles radiant. They looked at him with gratitude, the weight of their pasts lifted from their shoulders. Thank you, the old woman from the neighborhood said, her eyes glistening with tears of joy. You've freed us. Eli's heart swelled with emotion as he took in the scene around him. The neighborhood was alive again, vibrant and full of life. Children played, laughter filled the air, and the sun shone brightly overhead. It was a place of hope, where the past had been woven into the fabric of a brighter future. I didn't do it alone, Eli replied, looking at the faces of those who had once been lost. You all helped me remember who I was. The families gathered around him, their presence a testament to the strength of community and love. Together, they formed a circle around the oak tree, hands joined as they celebrated their newfound freedom. Eli felt the energy radiating from them, a bond that transcended time and space. He had unlocked not just the truth of the neighborhood, but also the power of unity, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope and love could prevail. A new beginning. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the neighborhood, Eli knew he had found his way home. The shadows that had once haunted him had been replaced with light, and the echoes of the past had transformed into a chorus of laughter and joy. He looked up at the oak tree, its branches swaying gently in the breeze. It stood as a symbol of resilience, a reminder of the history that had shaped them all. And as he felt the warmth of the community enveloping him, Eli understood that he was not just a part of the past. He was a vital part of the future. With a sense of purpose, Eli smiled at the family surrounding him. They had faced darkness together. And now,